All right, our next speaker will be Reverend Shumake. And then after that, we'll hear from Quanah Brightman, and then Teresa Vaughn, and then we will be done. Right, Reverend Shumake? Everyone here knows who he is.
So again, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to come out. Cayenne had shared with me this event would be taking place, and she had asked that I put together some words, a speech to present to you. And you know, I sat there and I thought about my nephew Anthony, whose life was taken in Solano State Prison. And I looked over a speech that had been written a few years ago when Cayenne had an event here, and the words and the pain that I felt then is the same pain that I feel right now. And you know, we're here today to celebrate some cases that have gone through the courts and families have won. But I say to all of you who are listening, this is not about money. I believe today that if you ask those families who have won this case, would they rather have the money or would they rather have their loved one? I believe the answer would be they would rather have their loved one at home than any amount of money that they could ever win in the courts. What is going on in the California Department of Corrections, it amounts to what is referred to as terrorism. When you look at the mental neglect that has taken place within these institutions, these are not isolated cases. You've heard today the pain and the suffering of many families, and that's just a few families. Cayenne has been working with families up and down the state of California and outside the state of California. And I just don't know how in the world she does it with no budget. So Cayenne, I say to you, thank you. Because on that dreadful day back in June of 2004, when we received the notification that my nephew Anthony had died or was murdered in the California Department of Corrections in Vacaville, our whole world changed and has forever been changed. And here was a young, healthy man, 40 years old, went in and had a tooth pulled. The tooth became infected. And for 6 days, this young man was suffering. The word that we received from some of the inmates was that they would not treat him. They would not send him to a doctor and give him the medication that he needed. For 6 days, the pain had gotten to the point where it was unbearable. The medical report said that his whole neck and face had swollen up. He was spitting out sputum. And then they finally decided to call an ambulance. And when that ambulance came, the doctor told them, well, send him to Manteca. Now, what's interesting, in Solano County, there was a hospital called Vaca Valley, which was 10, 15 minutes away. Instead of sending my nephew to Vaca Valley, they sent him 2.5 hours away to Manteca. Did you hear what I said? Instead of sending him 10 or 15 minutes away to Vaca Valley Hospital, they shipped that young man 2.5 hours away to Manteca, where he died. Healthy young man. Had a tooth pulled, tooth became infected, and now he's dead. My nephew was given a prison sentence, not a death sentence. And I tell you today, had I not experienced this myself, I would never believe that in America, a young man could have a tooth pulled and wind up dying. The terrorism that has taken place in the California Department of Corrections is real. And what we need is politicians that have the courage to stop these terrorist acts that's taking place. These are United States citizens. These are American citizens. Yes, they may be incarcerated, but they don't deserve to be murdered. They don't deserve to be tortured. We talk about what's going on outside this country. What about the terrorism that's taking place in the California Department of Corrections? So the union in Cayenne, she's been standing strong to give us a voice. She is the voice of the voiceless. She's been reaching out to all these families, and my family still has no closure. We have no closure. There was cover-up taking place in this case. We weren't notified properly of our young nephew's death, how he died and why he died. But what we do know is that they did not treat him as they should have treated him. The medical neglect that took place is unbearable. And what is going on in families throughout the United States and throughout California should not be tolerated. So I say to you that's here today, continue to stand and continue to fight. Because these are terrorists. It's terrorism taking place right here in the United States. Right here in the California Department of Correction. Our family members don't deserve to go through what they're going through. And God bless the woman who stood up, Deborah, and came forth. Because there's so much cover-up taking place within these institutions. They are the true criminals. They are the murderers. And who's bringing them to justice? Who's bringing them to justice? These are inmates who have mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers and grandparents who love them. These men and women is given prison sentences, not death sentences. And there's got to be a voice. And so I say to you today, I've come from Richmond, California, and our family is still suffering, and we continue to suffer, and we will forever suffer as a result of this. And we have no closure. There's no case being fought in the courts to bring the justice to my family. We continue to suffer. We don't have all of the answers, nor will we ever have the answers, because we don't have enough men and women standing up to fight these cases. And it takes money. And now these families don't have the kind of resources to move a case like that forward. And so I say to you, keep these men and women in your prayers. And I say, keep Cayenne in your prayers. We got to do all that we can to support her in her work, because without Cayenne, these men and women in these institutions would have no voice. She is the voice of the voiceless, and we've got to do what we can to support her. Thank you, and God bless you.